My wife sued me for child support, but it took 2 DNA tests to prove the child wasn't mine, exposing her long years scam. So, I'm a 35-year-old guy, and this all started back in 2017 when I met Lindsay, 32 at the time, at my best friend Tyler's wedding. I was Tyler's best man, she was a bridesmaid, and yeah, I know, it sounds like a scene straight out of a rom-com. Trust me, though, this story is anything but romantic. At that point in my life, I had things figured out. I had a solid career working as a software engineer for a major financial services firm. Those banking systems don't secure themselves, after all. I just bought my first home, and my biggest stress was getting my Packard Hawk, a restoration project with my dad, back into shape. Life was treating me well. Tyler's wedding was at some ridiculously expensive vineyard in Napa. His wife's family had serious money, the kind that doesn't blink at a $25,000 floral arrangement. That's where I first noticed Lindsay. She was stunning, quick-witted, and, at least back then, seemed genuinely interested in my job. But in hindsight, it wasn't my career she cared about. It was my income. Hindsight's a cruel thing. Huh? After the wedding reception, one thing led to another, and, well, you can guess the rest. The surprising part? We actually kept in touch afterward. She lived about an hour away, working as a social media manager for what she swore was the next big tech startup. Something about a social network for pet owners that would rival Facebook. Sounded impressive at the time. Reality? The company was just 3 dudes squatting in a WeWork space, burning through their parents' investment money. And, shockingly, that startup crashed and burned within 6 months. Lindsay was devastated. She called me in tears, talking about how much effort she had poured into the company. In reality, her job was posting cute dog photos on Instagram. But, like an idiot, I felt bad for her. By that point, we were officially dating, and with her lease ending, I suggested she move in with me while she figured things out. I had the space and I figured, why not? Biggest mistake ever. Now, let me give you a little background on Lindsay. Had I known this earlier, I would have run for the hills. She grew up in an upper-middle-class family where her dad funded everything: private schools, college, luxury vacations, a brand-new car, credit cards that mysteriously paid themselves off. But even he had a breaking point. At 25, he finally cut her off, probably realizing that his daughter had no intention of ever earning her own way. From there, she bounced between failed startups and half-hearted influencer gigs, never staying anywhere long enough to build an actual career. But I'll give her this. She could sell herself. She made every venture sound like it was one step away from huge success. Once she moved in, she suddenly had big plans. She was going to be a high-powered social media consultant, launching her own business and working with major brands. She spent hours making PowerPoint presentations, talking about the important connections she was building. And like an idiot, I bought into it. Meanwhile, my credit card statements kept getting longer. The first red flag I ignored, and oh, there were so many, came when she borrowed my card for what she called essential business expenses. Those essentials? A brand new $2,150 MacBook Pro, because, apparently, normal laptops don't cut it. A $450 ring light setup, 4 business meetings that never happened, and about $1,500 worth of professional outfits she never wore outside of Instagram selfies. The moment I brought it up, she flipped the script. Suddenly, I was unsupportive. I didn't believe in her dreams. And, of course, she threw in the classic line, "An investment in yourself is the best investment." And here's the worst part. I fell for it. At the time, I was pulling in about $150,000 a year, had some savings, and thought I was helping the woman I loved get her business off the ground. I mean, that's what partners do, right? Plus, when she wasn't treating my bank account like a personal ATM, she was fun. We'd take spontaneous road trips. She left little notes around the house. She even pretended to be interested in my car restoration hobby. And I do mean pretended. We tied the knot in 2019, 2 years after we met. Lindsay insisted we get married at the same vineyard where Tyler's wedding took place, because it was part of our story. And since her parents claimed they wanted to contribute, but never actually did, the financial burden fell entirely on me. The wedding was gorgeous. Everyone had a blast. Lindsay looked thrilled. And for a moment, I actually believed I had made the right choice. Then, during the reception, my dad, an old-school guy who spent 30 years working at Packard and rebuilding classic cars in his spare time, pulled me aside. He looked me straight in the eye and asked, "Did you get a prenup?" I nodded, thank God for my lawyer friend Brandon, who all but forced me to. Dad exhaled like I'd just avoided stepping on a landmine, but he still wasn't convinced. "Just remember, son, a woman who loves you for you won't need your credit card to prove it." I should have listened. But you know how it is when you're caught up in love. You tell yourself your story is different, that the red flags aren't warning signs, they're just quirks. I was about to learn the hard way that I wasn't the exception. I was the prime example. If I thought marriage would settle Lindsay down, I couldn't have been more wrong. The moment we tied the knot, she completely abandoned even the slightest pretense of caring about finances. It was as if, in her mind, the wedding band came with an all-access pass to my bank account. But let me take you through exactly how bad things got, step by painful step. About 3 months after the wedding, I landed a promotion at work. My new role as a senior consultant bumped my salary up to $180,000 a year, which should have made life more comfortable. Instead, Lindsay took this as a green light to fully commit to her personal brand, a brand that, up until that point, only existed in her imagination. Without a word to me, she quit her part-time job at a local marketing agency, the only real, stable work she'd held in years. No warning, no discussion. Just came home one day, beaming, and announced, "Babe, I'm finally free to follow my dreams." Apparently, her dreams involved gutting our home office and turning it into a content creation studio. And by gutting, I mean she went on an unchecked shopping spree, blowing $4,500 of our savings on cameras, lights, backdrops, and, because why not? A red velvet couch she claimed was essential for her brand aesthetic. Now, we had already agreed that our savings were meant to cover a new roof for the house, something actually essential. But when I reminded her of this little detail, she waved me off. "But babe, this is an investment in our future. You don't want me working in a space that doesn't inspire me, do you?" Lindsay's grand business plan? A YouTube channel focused on luxury lifestyle on a budget. The irony was painful. She decided the best way to build credibility in the luxury space was to start buying designer items with my credit card, filming herself unboxing them, and then returning most of them after shooting. But some things just mysteriously never made it back to the store. Case in point, one day, while organizing our closet, I found a shoebox hiding in the back. Inside, a pair of $1,200 Jimmy Choo heels she swore were just props for her channel. Meanwhile, my Packard Hawk, the car my dad and I had spent years restoring together, suddenly, it was a problem. Lindsay started complaining that it was taking up too much space in the garage. Mind you, this was the same car we'd put 5 years of weekends into, and we were so close to getting it back on the road. But in Lindsay's world, it was in the way of her wellness and yoga studio, because apparently, the fully furnished spare bedroom wasn't the right vibe for her videos. Then came the final straw. I got home one evening to find out she had listed my car for sale on Facebook Marketplace. She hadn't actually sold it yet, but she had already let people come see it. Her excuse? "Babe, we need the space. And honestly, you spend too much time on that old car anyway. Don't you want to support my wellness journey?" That led to our first major fight. I had never raised my voice at her before, but when I found out she had tried to sell my car behind my back, I lost it. She immediately started crying, accusing me of being controlling and unsupportive of her dreams. And then came the classic manipulation tactic. If you really loved me, you'd want me to succeed. The next day, she apologized, swore up and down she'd never pull something like that again. And, like an idiot, I believed her. But instead of stopping, she just got sneakier about sabotaging the car. She would accidentally leave the garage door open when it was raining, or stack her production equipment dangerously close to it. So close that one day, she accidentally scratched the fresh paint job with her yoga gear. At that point, I gave up. I sold the car. Telling my dad was brutal. He didn't even say much, just nodded, looked away, and changed the subject. But I could see the disappointment in his face. That car wasn't just a project, it was our project. Years of father-son time, gone. All because Lindsay wanted a yoga studio. And where did the money from selling the car go? Straight into Lindsay's next business venture, a business retreat in Maldives, which was really just a luxury influencer vacation. She came back full of new ideas, swearing she was going to build a wellness coaching business that would change lives. Her first move? Dropping thousands of dollars on essential oils, meditation cushions, and branding materials, all on my dime. She even had business cards printed that read, Lindsay Carter, holistic wellness expert and lifestyle curator. Want to know how many clients she got? 0. But she did manage to rack up $12,000 in credit card debt trying to launch a skincare line. The inventory? Sat in our garage, right where my car used to be, until it expired. When I confronted her about the boxes of unused, rotting face creams, she actually blamed me. Well, maybe if you had promoted my business to your coworkers' wives, we wouldn't be in this mess. By this point, I was working 60-hour weeks just trying to keep up with her insane spending. I'd come home drained, only to find she had blown $250 on takeout because she was too stressed to cook. Our house? A disaster zone. She was always too busy creating content to clean. And her YouTube empire? After a full year of full-time hustling, she had a whopping 342 subscribers. Looking back, I realized she was probably busy posting about our perfect life on Instagram while maxing out my credit cards behind the scenes. But, of course, I wasn't allowed to follow her social media because she insisted it would mess with her analytics. If there were ever a capital of red flags, I was living in it. The final straw? I found out Lindsay had taken out a $25,000 loan against my 401k. Without telling me, she had figured out my password because, like an idiot, I had used my Packard Hawks model year and nickname and drained the account for what she called a business opportunity. In reality, she blew it all on a mentorship program run by some Instagram guru who promised to help her reach 100,000 followers. When I found out, I couldn't even look at her. I spent the next week sleeping in my office, too furious to even be in the same room with her. I told my coworkers I was testing a remote work setup, but in reality, I was trying to figure out how the hell to get out of this nightmare. I wasn't just stuck in a bad marriage, I was drowning in it. And the worst part? I was too embarrassed to tell anyone. My dad's words about the credit cards kept playing on a loop in my head. I should have listened. Remember my lawyer friend, Brandon? The one who had warned me about Lindsay for years? Yeah. When I finally hit rock bottom and called him from my office couch at 2 a.m., his response wasn't shock or even an, I told you so. All he said was, send me your calendar link. We'll talk in the morning. Brandon's the kind of guy you need in your corner. Someone who'd rather help you clean up your mess than rub your face in it. And man, was there a mess to clean. The very next morning, I checked our accounts and saw the final straw. Lindsay had somehow opened 3 new credit cards in my name and maxed them all out overnight. The total damage? $52,000. Her excuse? Babe, I know we've been stressed about our relationship, and shopping helps my anxiety. I wish I was making that up. Brandon took one look at the credit card statements and actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because Lindsay had just handed us the easiest divorce case ever. That prenup I had thankfully signed before we got married? It had a financial misconduct clause. Lindsay had just signed her own defeat. When I finally sat my parents down and told them everything, my mom burst into tears. My dad? He just sat at his workbench, silently cleaning engine parts, his version of processing emotions. And then, after a long pause, he said something that snapped me awake. Son, she's not going to stop. Not until she either hits rock bottom or finds another target. Right now, you're just the easier option. That was it. I was done. Filing for divorce was surprisingly simple. The hard part was actually telling Lindsay. I had rehearsed this big speech, thinking maybe I could reason with her, get her to see why this had to happen. But when I walked into the house, ready to break the news, I found her filming another one of her YouTube videos in the kitchen. She had spent $300, on my card of course, buying organic groceries as props. Meanwhile, our actual fridge was empty. I waited until she finished recording, then said it. Lindsay, I'm filing for divorce. And do you know what she did? She grabbed her phone, hit record, and started filming again. Guys, I have to be real with you about something. I walked out before I could become part of her My Truth video series. Over the next few weeks, Lindsay went through every phase of manipulation in her attempt to stop the divorce. First, she love-bombed me, dug up my old Packard Hawk parts, the ones she had hidden instead of throwing away, and tried to use them as bait, saying we could rebuild another car together. Hard pass. When that didn't work, she flipped to threats. I'll tell everyone you were abusive. I wasn't. I'll ruin your career. She tried, but my boss already knew exactly what she was like. I'll make sure no woman ever wants to date you again. Spoiler, that didn't work either. But the worst part? She started a full-blown social media campaign portraying herself as a survivor of financial abuse. According to her Instagram posts, I was a controlling monster who had never let her work or follow her dreams. Meanwhile, I had spreadsheets proving that I had poured over $250,000 into her failed businesses. This was Brandon's moment to shine. Lindsay's TikTok lawyer tried to argue that she deserved alimony because she had sacrificed her career for our marriage. Brandon shut that down immediately. He pulled up Lindsay's own Instagram posts, where she had spent years bragging about being a self-made entrepreneur. You can't claim you sacrificed your career when you're out there posting #girlboss content every day. The divorce was finalized in early 2022. Thanks to the prenup and Lindsay's reckless spending, she walked away with way less than she expected. She got the camera gear, that red couch she was obsessed with, a tiny settlement just to get her out of my life faster. The last time I saw her was in the courthouse hallway, where she tried one final manipulation tactic. She looked at me with fake tears in her eyes and whispered, "I hope you know you're throwing away the best thing that ever happened to you." I just smiled and replied, "The best thing that ever happened to me was Brandon making me sign that prenup." The look on her face? Priceless. The next year was pure freedom. I got promoted to senior management at work. Turns out, working 60-hour weeks actually pays off when you're not funding someone else's Instagram career. I started hitting the gym again. Amazing how much free time you have when you're not constantly dealing with financial disasters. I even bought another project car, a 1970 AMC Javelin that needed some love. My dad and I spent weekends working on it, making up for lost time. Life was finally good. By 2023, I was in a great place. My AMC Javelin was almost finished. Work was going great. I had even started dating again. Then, out of nowhere, everything changed. I got home one evening, went to check the mail, and froze when I saw it. A certified letter from the county courthouse. Immediately, my stomach dropped. Right there, in my driveway, I tore open the envelope and scanned the first few lines. And I swear, for a full minute, my brain couldn't even process what I was reading. It was a petition for child support. According to the document, I had a 1-year-old son, Caleb Brandon Carter. The petition accused me of abandoning my parental responsibilities and demanded that I start paying support immediately. I just stood there, gripping the letter, trying to wrap my head around the impossible. Because there was just one small problem. I had never had a kid. This is the part where my brain nearly short-circuited trying to process the insanity. According to Lindsay's legal petition, the kid was born in November 2022, which, for anyone keeping track, would mean he was conceived right after our divorce was finalized. Her claim? That we had one last passionate night together, and she got pregnant from that. That never happened. I must have read the paperwork a dozen times, just sitting there in my car, trying to make sense of it. And then I saw something that made my stomach drop. A birth certificate, with my name listed as the father. She had actually put my name on an official government document without my consent. I didn't even know that was legal. And the more I read, the worse it got. Lindsay had spun an entire sob story in the court filing, claiming she had desperately tried to contact me throughout the pregnancy, but that I had blocked her on everything. Which was true, but completely irrelevant since there was no pregnancy to begin with. She wasn't just asking for child support. She was demanding $2,400 per month in payments, back pay for the past year, full medical insurance coverage for the kid. I grabbed my phone and called Brandon immediately. It was 9 p.m., but this was emergency-level chaos. He picked up on the first ring because, like I said before, Brandon is the best lawyer friend on the planet. I explained the situation, and after a long silence, he finally spoke. "Don't do anything. Don't contact her. Don't post about this anywhere. Be at my office first thing tomorrow. That night was hell. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, running through every possible angle of this scam. Had Lindsay actually created a whole human being just to trap me financially? I knew she was manipulative. I just didn't know she was next-level psychopath manipulative. By 3 a.m., I was Googling how to prove you're not the father like some desperate guy in a bad TV drama. The next morning, I walked into Brandon's office, running on zero sleep and pure adrenaline. And that's when he hit me with something that made my blood run cold. In this state, if you don't contest paternity within 30 days of being served, you can be legally declared the father by default, even without a DNA test. I stared at him, feeling the room spin. Lindsay had timed this perfectly. She filed right after the holiday court slowdown, betting that I'd miss the deadline while the system was backed up with cases. But here's where things got really interesting. Brandon started cross-referencing the dates, and something wasn't adding up. If the baby was born in November 2022, that would mean she got pregnant sometime in February or March of that year. But our divorce wasn't finalized until March 2022, which meant that even if her story were true, which it wasn't, the baby wouldn't have been born until December 2022 at the earliest. Then, Brandon pulled up Lindsay's Instagram from a burner account we used to keep tabs on her. And guess what? In May 2022, she had posted photos of herself at a music festival, very clearly not pregnant. So unless she had the world's fastest pregnancy, she was lying through her teeth. We immediately filed a response, demanding a DNA test and challenging the birth certificate. But Brandon wasn't done. He hired a private investigator to dig into Lindsay's recent past. I was already drowning in debt from the divorce. What was a few $1,000s more if it meant shutting this scam down? And that's when we hit the jackpot. The investigator found out that Lindsay had been living with some guy named Ryan for most of 2022. Ryan had actually been paying her child support under the table, to the tune of $1,400 a month. That is, until October 2023. Guess what happened right after he stopped paying? Lindsay filed her petition against me in December 2023. But the real kicker? The PI also found Lindsay's TikTok account, because of course, she had one. She had been posting dramatic single mom videos, talking about her struggles as a mother abandoned by a deadbeat dad. The comments were full of sympathy, with strangers calling out the horrible, selfish father who had left her to raise a child alone. That deadbeat dad? According to her fairy tale, it was me. But then, we hit the final piece of the puzzle. In one of her videos from July 2022, she accidentally showed a piece of mail sitting on her kitchen counter. The name on it? Ryan Wallace. Same Ryan who had been paying her support for over a year. The PI managed to track him down, and when we finally met him, everything fell into place. Brandon and I arranged to meet Ryan at a coffee shop outside of town. Neutral ground. We weren't sure if Ryan was in on the scam or just another victim. Turns out, he was definitely a victim. And his story made me want to punch a hole in the wall. Ryan was a software developer who met Lindsay at a co-working space in early 2022, right after my divorce. She introduced herself as a digital marketing consultant who was building her own agency. Sound familiar? She was running the exact same scam, just with a different target. Ryan stirred his coffee absent-mindedly as he told us how Lindsay had won him over. She seemed so genuine, he said. She told me she was finally focusing on her career after leaving a toxic marriage where her ex wouldn't let her work. I nearly choked on my drink. She had completely flipped the script, painting herself as the victim of the exact thing she had done to me. Ryan and Lindsay had started dating in March 2022, before our divorce was even finalized. And suddenly, everything made perfect sense. The real father of this child? It was never me. It was Ryan. And Lindsay had been trying to pin it on me the moment he stopped paying. She had run the ultimate scam. And now, we had proof. And trust me, this is where it gets really fun. By May 2022, Lindsay had fully moved in with Ryan, settling into his sleek downtown loft like she had always belonged there. Then, in June, she dropped the bombshell. She was pregnant. Ryan was thrilled. At 36, he was in a great place. Solid career, financially stable, and more than ready to start a family. Lindsay played the part of the perfect mom-to-be, signing up for prenatal yoga, snapping adorable baby bump photos for Instagram, and even making Ryan drive her to doctor's appointments. There was just one problem. Lindsay was never actually pregnant. The whole thing? A scam from the start. Lindsay had bought a silicone pregnancy belly, one of those hyper-realistic ones that influencers and actresses use. The PI dug through her Amazon purchase history and found the receipt. And those doctor's appointments? All staged. Lindsay carefully scheduled them at times when the clinic was actually closed, making sure Ryan never actually went inside with her. Her excuse? COVID restrictions, babe. The office doesn't allow extra guests. Ryan never questioned it. Because, seriously, who fakes an entire pregnancy? Then, in November 2022, Lindsay made her big move. She told Ryan she was going to visit her sister in another state for a women-only baby shower. A week later, she returned, holding a newborn baby. Surprise! I went into early labor while visiting my sister. Ryan was devastated that he had missed the birth, but he was too excited about becoming a dad to question the story. And for the next year, he played the role she had scripted for him. He paid the rent. He covered all baby expenses. He funded Lindsay's postpartum recovery, which was really just shopping sprees disguised as self-care. He even started a college fund for Aiden. Lindsay had him so convinced that he never questioned why she refused to put his name on the birth certificate. It's just paperwork, babe. We know you're his dad. That's what really matters. Eventually, the cracks started to show. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. For starters, Aiden didn't look like him, or Lindsay, for that matter. Every time Ryan brought it up, Lindsay would snap at him, acting offended and hurt. How could you even say that? Do you not love Aiden? Classic Lindsay manipulation, guilt-tripping him for asking completely reasonable questions. Then, Ryan's mother, a registered nurse, started poking holes in Lindsay's timeline of events. Something doesn't add up, she told him. By October 2023, Ryan couldn't ignore the red flags anymore. He insisted on a paternity test. That's when Lindsay lost it. She screamed. She cried. She accused him of betraying their family. But Ryan wasn't budging. He bought a home DNA test, and that was when Lindsay showed her true colors. The next weekend, while Ryan was away at a work conference, she vanished. She took Aiden, cleared out most of her belongings, and left a note. Your lack of trust has broken our family. I can't do this anymore. Ryan tried to track her down, but she had blocked him on everything. At first, he felt guilty, like maybe he had pushed her too hard. Then, when he stopped paying her under-the-table child support, she suddenly reappeared, by filing for child support against me. Luckily, Ryan had been documenting everything since Lindsay started acting sketchy about the birth certificate. He had texts from Lindsay, admitting to faking doctor's appointments. He had security camera footage from their building, showing her taking off her fake pregnancy belly. He had proof of every cent he had sent her for Aiden's expenses. And then, RPI found something even bigger. Lindsay's sister, the one who supposedly hosted the baby shower where she went into early labor, she had been living in Canada since 2020. There was no baby shower. There was no sister's house. There was no early labor. Lindsay had just vanished for a week, then showed up with a baby. And that's when Brandon had his aha moment. We need to subpoena the actual birth records, he said, flipping through the case file. I think I know what she did. And if I'm right, she's in serious trouble. We filed the subpoena request immediately. But of course, courts move slowly. Meanwhile, Lindsay's TikTok lawyer kept stalling, trying to delay the court-ordered DNA test by claiming Lindsay was too emotionally fragile to handle a hearing. Then, the day before our court date, Lindsay pulled her final stunt. Lindsay posted a video on Instagram, crying into the camera, telling her thousands of followers that her abusive ex was denying his own child. She begged them to pray for her strength. The comments section? A dumpster fire. People were blindly defending her, calling the deadbeat dad, aka me, a monster. Even worse, some of them were offering to donate money to help her fight in court. Little did they know, her entire house of cards was about to come crashing down. The morning of the hearing, I was a wreck. Even with all our evidence, I had seen Lindsay talk her way out of insane situations before. And deep down, I knew she was good at it. Brandon met me outside the courthouse, flipping through his thick folder of evidence like it was his lucky deck of cards. Remember, he said, patting the file, let her talk. The more she says, the more she'll contradict herself. Ryan showed up too, looking like he had aged a decade in just a few months. Can't blame the guy. Finding out you've been paying for a child that might not even be yours would keep anyone up at night. Then, Lindsay arrived. And wow, she looked like she had raided the humble single mom section of a costume shop. No makeup, hair in a messy bun, dressed in scrubs, despite never having worked in healthcare a day in her life. And in her arms? For the first time ever, I finally laid eyes on Aiden. And everything in that courtroom was about to blow up in Lindsay's face. The first thing I noticed? The kid was adorable, but he didn't look anything like Lindsay. Suddenly, that seemed very relevant. Then, I glanced at her TikTok lawyer, and the guy looked like he was about one breath away from throwing up. First good sign. He kept whispering to Lindsay, showing her something on his phone. Later, we found out why. Apparently, he had just discovered some of the evidence we were about to present, and he was desperately trying to convince Lindsay to settle quietly. But Lindsay, being Lindsay, thought she could charm and lie her way out of anything. The judge overseeing our case was an older guy, the kind who had seen every scam imaginable and had zero patience for theatrics. So when Lindsay's lawyer tried one last delay tactic, claiming she had religious objections to a DNA test, since when? The judge just stared at him in silence. The lawyer sat down. Then Brandon stood up and dropped the first bombshell. Your Honor, before we proceed with the DNA test, we have evidence that the birth certificate submitted to this court was fraudulently obtained. The judge raised an eyebrow. The universal legal sign for this better be good. Brandon pulled out the subpoenaed hospital records, or, more accurately, the complete lack of them. There was zero evidence that Lindsay had given birth in any hospital in the state. But that wasn't the biggest revelation. The real shocker was how she actually got Aiden's birth certificate. Turns out, Lindsay had used a tactic common in identity fraud. She submitted paperwork to a small county office that didn't have strict verification checks. She listed a home birth and a midwife's name to make it look legitimate. The midwife had retired 3 years ago. The address Lindsay used? A vacant lot. Then came the moment that made the entire courtroom gasp. Brandon pulled up screenshots from Lindsay's messages on various social media platforms. She had actively been searching for a baby around the time Aiden was supposedly born. The PI found messages Lindsay had sent to multiple pregnant women, inquiring about private adoptions. And when Lindsay started posting on social media as a single mom, some of these women recognized her and reached out to us. I swear, Lindsay's face went through 50 different emotions as Brandon laid out the evidence. And when Ryan's security footage showed her wearing a fake pregnancy belly, she actually tried to object, saying the footage was taken out of context. The judge shut her down instantly. Ms. Carter, unless you're about to explain how security footage can misrepresent a fake pregnancy belly, I suggest you let your counsel do the talking. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Can't blame him. He was probably realizing he had signed up for a circus act without knowing he was the clown. Then, Brandon delivered the final punch. Your Honor, we have definitive proof that Lindsay has been claiming 2 different men, my client and Mr. Wallace, as Aiden's father, depending on who was willing to send her money at the time. Lindsay's lawyer? He started packing up his briefcase. He knew this case was dead in the water. Then, the judge turned directly to Lindsay. Ms. Carter, can you provide any medical documentation of your pregnancy and delivery? Lindsay immediately went into her usual routine, voice trembling, eyes welling up with fake tears. Your Honor, I was so traumatized by the birth experience. I didn't keep records because... The judge cut her off mid-sentence. That's not what I asked. Do you have any medical proof that you gave birth to this child? For the first time in her life, Lindsay had no response. She looked around the courtroom, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Then she did something none of us expected. She broke character completely. This is ridiculous, she snapped, her soft, humble single mom voice instantly replaced with the entitled shriek I had heard far too many times during our marriage. I don't have to prove anything to you. That home birth was totally legal. Brandon was practically grinning. Your Honor, we have one last piece of evidence. Then he pulled out the real bombshell. Brandon handed the judge a file containing police reports from a small town 3 hours away. In November 2022, the exact time Lindsay claimed she had given birth, there had been multiple reports about a woman matching Lindsay's description hanging around a maternity ward, posing as a lactation consultant to get access to new mothers. The judge's face darkened with every page he read. Then, he looked up at Lindsay and said the words that made the entire courtroom go silent. "Ms. Carter, are you aware that trafficking in minors is a federal offense?" The TikTok lawyer stood up so fast, his chair nearly fell over. "Your Honor, I need to withdraw as counsel. I can no longer represent Ms. Carter in this matter." Then he straight up walked out. Never seen anything like it. Lindsay? She completely lost it. "This is all a misunderstanding," she screamed. But Brandon wasn't finished. "Your Honor, we have a witness who has been searching for her missing child for over a year." Then, a young woman stepped forward, Caleb. She had been a patient at that same hospital in November 2022. She had given birth to a baby boy but was struggling with severe postpartum depression. And Lindsay? She had befriended her, posing as a social worker, convincing Megan Brooks to temporarily sign over guardianship of her baby while she got help. Megan Brooks had spent over a year desperately trying to find her son. She had filed police reports, but Lindsay had used fake names and forged documents. Then, one day, she saw Lindsay on TikTok, bragging about being a single mom, and recognized her immediately. The judge didn't hesitate. He ordered a DNA test, not just to prove I wasn't the father, but to confirm if Aiden was actually Megan Brooks's son. Lindsay snapped. She tried to run out of the courtroom with Aiden, screaming that she was just trying to give him a better life. The bailiff stopped her at the door. She fought, screamed, kicked, sobbed, but it was over. The DNA test results came back within a week. Aiden was not my son. Aiden was Megan Brooks's son. Lindsay had essentially stolen a baby from a vulnerable mother and then tried to use him to scam multiple men for child support. The judge was beyond furious. She was charged with fraud, identity theft, custody interference, multiple federal offenses. And just like that, Lindsay's reign of manipulation was over. By the time the dust settled, Ryan and I both had restraining orders against Lindsay. The court ordered her to pay back every single cent Ryan had given her in fake child support, which, considering she was headed to prison, wasn't exactly going to happen anytime soon. And speaking of prison, she was facing 15 to 20 years behind bars. Still waiting on final sentencing, but the judge didn't go easy on her. On top of that, the case had been referred to the FBI for potential federal charges. Turns out, this scam ran even deeper than we thought. The best part of all this? Megan Brooks finally got Aiden back. And as it turns out, she's an incredible mom. She had gone through intensive treatment for postpartum depression and had never stopped searching for her son. After everything was over, she even reached out to thank me and Ryan for helping bring Lindsay down. Now, she's working with a nonprofit that helps mothers struggling with postpartum depression and advocates for better hospital security. She turned her worst nightmare into something meaningful, which is more than can be said for Lindsay. Through all of this, Ryan and I actually became friends. We still meet up every once in a while to work on the AMC Javelin, swapping stories about how we both got played by Lindsay. He's doing a lot better now, back on his feet, dating a great woman who, get this, has an actual job. She's a teacher, and from what he tells me, she's nothing like Lindsay. No manipulations, no scams, just a normal, healthy relationship. As for me, I finally finished restoring the AMC Javelin with my dad. That car, which had been sitting in Lindsay's way for years, finally roared back to life, just like I did. And my girlfriend? Yeah, she's the paralegal I mentioned before. She's actually interested when I talk about cars. No pretending, no eye-rolling, no manipulative guilt trips. She even helped organize the evidence for the trial and says this whole ordeal is going to make one hell of a story for her law school application. Honestly, she's a keeper. Once the truth came out, Lindsay's girl boss social media empire collapsed overnight. Her followers turned on her hard. Several drama channels on YouTube covered the entire scandal, dragging her name through the dirt. And the best part? Every single one of her social media accounts got banned. Apparently, platforms don't like it when you use them to document your own crimes. Last I heard, she was begging for a plea deal, but the prosecutor? Not feeling generous. Apparently, Tage Linsire might be other victims out there that we don't even know about yet. Edit. Holy crap, this blew up. Thanks for all the awards and support. Edit 2. For those asking for car tax, here's the finished AMC Javelin. Link removed by mods. Sorry. Edit 3. A lot of you are asking if Lindsay's still posting on social media. Nope. Every single one of her accounts got banned after the story broke. Turns out, social media platforms don't take kindly to people using them to run a criminal enterprise. Final update. Just got off the phone with Brandon. Lindsay's plea deal was rejected. She's going to prison. And just like that, Lindsay's scamming days are officially over. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to Cheating Storytelling so you never miss an update on more jaw-dropping real-life stories. Catch you in the next video.